Hello, are we live? I think we are live, right? Yeah. Okay. Hello. Good morning, or afternoon, or evening. My name is Evis, and I'm here with Robert and Richard. Um, let's do, first of all, we're going to talk about CodeSandbox SDK and what you can do with CodeSandbox SDK and what kind of things you can build. Um, let's start with some small introductions first. My name is Yves, or you can call me Yves, you can call me Ives. My name is pretty hard to pronounce in the Netherlands, where I'm from. My friends call me Flip, so yeah, you can call me Flip as well. I am one of the co-founders of CodeSandbox, which is an online development environment, and we recently released, well, recently, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, we released CodeSandbox SDK, which essentially allows you to build your own code sandbox. Okay, Robert, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Robert, one of the co-founders of Blackbox. The founders were three brothers, all engineers, Richard, Roger, and myself.
Yep.
So Richard is here also with me here today. What we're building is autonomous coding agents. We scaled more than 10 million monthly active users, and CodeSandbox is an essential part of our infrastructure. We'll get the chance to show you how we've been working with them for the past 3 months to scale our agents and deploy it at scale to our user base. So we'll be able to share with you more detail during the presentation.
Great, great, really great. Okay, so the original thing that we wanted to fix with CodeSandbox SDK is making it easy for agents to execute code. And one of the most popular cases is when you, for example, go to ChatGPT or to another kind of chat application and you ask something about like your mortgage over time. Then the AI wants to sometimes generate a graph. And to generate a graph, it needs to execute code. That's is possible in some applications, in some it's not possible. But the main challenge is that whenever an AI generates code, you need to have an environment to execute that code in. And one of the most natural responses is to say, I'll try to run that code on my own server or my own computer. But one of the challenges with that is that you don't know if the code is safe to execute. Sometimes that code can have like a prompt injection and can have malicious execution, for example. And because of that, we started to build like an SDK to make it very easy to execute that code. So one of the things that we allow you to do with CodeSandbox is control how code is executed. You can put really any type of code in it, and we'll run that code in an isolated environment that cannot be accessed by others, and you can also limit access from that environment itself. And this idea of like being able to execute code, you can do quite some things with it. The simplest example that I shared was like you have like the Chat GPT, but there are also very other interesting products that you can build on top of this primitive, because we don't only allow you to execute the code. The second thing that we allow you to do with this sandbox architecture is do snapshot restore. For example, one of the nicest examples that I always think of is like if you work on your MacBook, for example, or your laptop, and you close it and you open it a day later, it will continue exactly where it left off, and you don't have to wait for the laptop to boot. And we do something similar with CodeSandbox, where at any point in time you can hibernate a sandbox, and then, for example, when you go and the sandbox will then at that point be killed, and when you come back a day later, it will continue running exactly what it like it was running before. And in a similar way, we also allow you to create live clones of those sandboxes. And I want to talk a bit more about like what you can do with this. So first of all, with this infrastructure, you could build your own code sandbox. That is one clear way to use code sandbox SDK. And we at code sandbox have built code sandbox on top of this infrastructure. But another kind of case that you could use this for is, let's say you want to build something like Lovable or V0. Then in those type of applications, the AI will write like some codes based on a prompt, and then it will then you will need an environment to show the actual running code to the user. You will need to put it in well, let's say a sandbox you need to run a dev server, and ultimately you need to show like the port that is opened to show what the AI has been writing. For that, CodeSandbox SDK is also perfectly suited, because even if someone, for example, starts using CodeSandbox SDK, if starts building an application using CodeSandbox SDK, you can also hibernate the sandbox for when they want to come back later, for example. So let me show you in terms of code how this works. I need to share a new screen. I can probably relatively easily do this. I'm gonna share this screen. Can you see my screen? It works. So you can. This is the API of CodeSandbox. I would keep it like I would look at this function only. This is mostly just boilerplate that I use for logging and everything. But this is the API. And to create a sandbox, you can do client.sandbox.create, and you get your own sandbox. And within this sandbox, you can do anything. You can create files similar to the file system API. You can say like, oh, I want to create an index that's the HTML, and I want to have content like, hello, everyone. Or you can run code. So you could say, for example, I want to run echo hello world. We could also log that out. And you can also run specific code. Like, for example, if you want to run some Python code, then you can do sandbox.shells.python.run. And you can do something like print 1 + 1. Similarly, you can also, for example, run JavaScript code. You can pretty much run any code. If you don't see the language in here, you can also, our default template, which we use for this sandbox when you create something, it has almost every language installed. So you could go as far to say, let me write some Go code and run that Go code, or let me download an HTTP server and run that HTTP server. In fact, I think I can also show you this. For example, if you want to run that HTTP server, you could say run. And then I think it's something like, what is the best way to start an HTTP server? I'm going to rely on Cursor now. Start an HTTP server. Like this, for example. And now it will start an HTTP server on port 8000. And for every port that we open inside the sandbox, we also generate a URL that you can share with people to look at. So I can now wait for that port to open. So I can do port is await sandbox.port, wait for port 8000, and I get a URL back that I can now log. I can do port.get preview URL. And now let's sleep for a while. Let's sleep for like, well, let's say 30 seconds. So now if I execute this code, npx demo.ts, you can see it's logged creating the sandbox. It wrote the file. It also outputted this hello world. It outputted 2 from this, well, from this 1 + 1. And this is the URL that it generates. And if I would open this URL, if I would do curl on this, you can see that it says hello world. Or hello everyone. I can also make it hello world. And you can also open this in your browser, for example, and get access. Now, one of the interesting flows that I really like about this type of infrastructure is what I mentioned before. We also allow you, for example, to hibernate a sandbox. So, for example, I could do await sandbox with hibernate. When we do this, we create a memory snapshot and we create a disk snapshot. We kill the sandbox. But the cool thing is, if I do a request to this sandbox on CodeSandbox side, we will automatically wake this sandbox so that it can serve the request. So let's run this code again and generate a new sandbox. I'm gonna generate a lot of sandboxes this way. Okay, now it has this port open, and if we wait just a bit, so now the program finished running. So this sandbox is now hibernated. I should probably have added a log here like hibernated, but you get the gist. Now, if I do a call to this, even though the sandbox is not running, I can do a call to this because ultimately we will wake the sandbox and it will then respond. And we wake the sandbox generally within 400 to 800 milliseconds. That is our speed. That's what we aim for, and that's generally what we can get with when we resume a VM from hibernation. In a similar vein, and this is something I find very cool. We can also live clone sandboxes. So we can say like we get a second sandbox if we call sandbox.fork, and now we have sandbox 2, and well, that sandbox is already running the processes that it was running before. So I can also get port information from this one, and now we can say like, let's say here forking sandbox, boop, boop, boop. And then we can say for sandbox 1, this is the preview URL, but for sandbox 2, this is the preview URL. And both preview URLs work. In fact, I can also, for example, go a bit further and say that sandbox 2 should have a different file. So I could do write text file and then say hello world for that one. Now, I could also hibernate them, but we already demoed that. If I execute this code, you will see that we have first one sandbox and it starts the server and we get, and now we fork it. So now we get a second sandbox out of this. And now we have two URLs that have this port available. And if I go to the first URL, it will say hello everyone. It will say hello world. Oh yeah, I put hello world in here. Okay. Oh, then it's not really. Oh, then the demo. Well, okay. The second one also says hello world because I did both hello worlds. But yeah, that's how it generally works. And I've done also like a demo in the past on a conference where I had like one Minecraft server running in one sandbox, and then I forked that sandbox to a second sandbox. And in the second sandbox, it was also running this Minecraft server, and you were able to look at both the worlds and make, yeah, they were exactly the same. How can you use this in practice? Well, let's say you're building like a coding application where an agent is writing code for you. What you can do is whenever the agent is doing something, right before the agent starts working on it, you fork the sandbox. And the nice thing about this is that you get automatic checkpointing. Let's say that the agent did something wrong, or the agent did not do what you would have liked for it to do, like maybe it deleted code that you didn't want to delete. Then you can revert back to the previous fork of the sandbox, and it will have everything running as it was running before. Like it will still have the dev server running in that exact same state. So that's a good way for you to create like a nice user experience on top of checkpointing for agents. Or for example, let's say you are building an application similar to Hero UI, where someone has generated a beautiful application using an AI has written a beautiful application, and you have a preview that shows it. But someone wants to make edits to that preview. They want to, for example, add their own colors. They could click fork and then recreate a clone of that sandbox. And then people have their own version that they can play with. And so we have a pretty this is a pretty small service of what I've shown you on what you can do with sandboxes. We also have things like tasks. We also have things like preview tokens, and we even have things like sessions where you can allow multiple people to connect to the same sandbox and collaborate with each other. So yeah, there's quite some things that you can still play with, but this is a general gist of what you can do with CodeSandbox SDK. Robert, would you be interested in sharing how you use CodeSandbox SDK?
Sure. Yeah. Richard will share the screen on a few examples to highlight how we've been working with the CodeSandbox. By the way, I saw a few people on YouTube were saying that Richard and I are twins. No, we met at a hackathon and we're able to start Blackbox together. Briefly, Richard will show you different examples For the purpose of time, we will run different examples in parallel so that we can see how the agents will be executing these tasks in parallel and how these tasks will be completed. There's various level of complexity. Will go from very simple game that the agent will build within a few seconds to something more front-end related and to something very complex. We're going to take the Signal open source server. So Signal is the messaging app with hundreds of millions of users. The code is open source, and we're going to be able, with the Blackbox agent, to do some interesting work with it. All this is not recorded. This will be in real time. So Richard is going to share his screen and go through these examples. And everything that you're going to be seeing on your screen, as Ivis was sharing, the code is being executed on CodeSandbox. And you'll be able to get access to it yourself. If you go on Blackbox AI, there's a feature called the App Builder, or if you have the extension on your IDE. So Richard is going to share the screen and we can comment through it.
Yeah. So here we'll, as Robert was mentioning, we'll go through just some brief examples just to illustrate some cases where CodeSandbox is being leveraged, and how also like Blackbox is also leveraging it. So just to give you some examples. So one here, we're going through there's the app builder from here. We're going to just point to briefly on Blackbox. Primarily is also directly on VS Code on the IDE. We're going to just run, for example, one task for Blackbox, the coding agent, to initiate something on the Signal server. While we're doing different things, we're going to maybe just rotate through a different set of examples. One of the examples, we're going to just, let's say, take a screenshot of this, and then here we're going to upload this image over here, and let's say this is the image, and we're going to send something to the CodeSandbox virtual device, and then we're going to be able to test it. So we're going to tell it, build me the exact same website. So we're going to initiate this, but also we're going to show something that we're just like having preparing just briefly, like just tried it while we were right before the session. But here, this is already running. You're going to be able to notice this is here also going to be able to leverage CodeSandbox from here. You're going to see any executions that's going to be done is going to be executed here. So there's different benefits. I was just pointed the different ways, but there's a lot of ways you can leverage it in terms of like the hibernation is really cool feature. There's many features that can be really beneficial, but we're going to just show one of these quick example. There's like lightweight cases. There's also some more heavy engineering cases that can happen. But here we're going to show this was just a few messages sent. This was also set up on a CodeSandbox virtual device here. So build me a shooting game. We just went through a few examples, and now we have it set up. There's the browser agent that's also being used here for testing, and then making sure if there's any error logs or anything. So it's going to be able to iterate. But just we're going to go through some lightweight game here, and we're going to be able to just take a look at just some small cases where you might be leveraging it, but there's definitely much more.
If we post this link right now on the thread here, anyone will be able to access it. As mentioned, this is something that is one of the advantages of working with Ivis and the team here, in addition to everything related to more security aspect. But as Richard is showing you here, we have a web IDE that the Blackbox agent is directly loaded on it. And you can get to it by going on Blackbox AI, the app builder feature, and this would allow you to build front end, back end, clone repos, and continue working on it. Richard can share more detail on it, and here we're starting to see some of the results of the agent work. All this is in real time, so you can see the work being done here.
So yeah, this is the image. We caught it at a point where the graph is rotating on Claude. So this is the one. We're gonna open it again.
And while Richard is testing it on the link, as you see in the web IDE, we do have a browser agent that would actually test whatever was being built, so that if there's any errors, it would actually refine itself. So you don't need to you see here, this is all, you don't need to invoke it. this is being invoked autonomously by Blackbox.
Yep.
So that if you don't want to test it and then come back saying, hey, I got these errors, the browser agent, just like the operator with OpenAI, here you have it embedded directly in Blackbox.
Like one of the key things anytime you're building something that requires visual testing, confirming all the functionalities that are there, you can leverage it. And there's many ways you can also use these virtual machines. Like if you're building projects on top of others, if you're continuously iterating on it, dynamically scaling up and down depending on the capacity that's required. But just to point to these were some quick lightweight. You can also clone some pretty bigger repos on it and do some work on it. But just wanted to
and the signal. So as we showed you here an example of like a very lightweight game that you can actually push it to go in very advanced capabilities, more front end cases, but also millions of developers use Blackbox. The Blackbox agent for also like very heavy workload.
Yep.
And here, this is some work that we're doing on the Signal server. So it doesn't have to be only front end or only back end. It has diverse capabilities. Blackbox ranks at the top of the SWE bench verified in terms of coding capability. So you'll be able to get access to the most advanced agent, and all the code is being executed on CodeSandbox here. So we've been working with Ivis and the team at CodeSandbox for more than 3-4 months now, and everything that they're building is really amazing, and you'll be able to leverage their infrastructure to like we're testing it at very high scale, and their support is really great.
And one of the ways here also that we're continuously exploring of leveraging CodeSandbox for cases where you might be using it completely on the web, but also like here in this case, this is the Signal server where the coding Blackbox agent is working on it. We're also finding ways to use it, leverage it from your local ID, and have these virtual devices do some testing on some of the codes that's being done. So it doesn't have to be purely just through a web browser. You can also it can also be directly connected to some local device that you're working on, but also testing some of these some of the changes from the agents in virtual devices. But just here going through some of a few examples. These were just a mix of like lightweight, a bit more just maybe visual examples, more game examples. But also on code bases that are more maybe on a common day-to-day engineering work that people would be using. But this is maybe just a quick touch point on that.
And one last thing related to AI. Also, someone was mentioning something. I'm a digital clone of Richard, and I'm trained on his knowledge, so I'm commenting here during the call. So,
but.
So this is from our end, as mentioned, like these 3 examples, very lightweight game, more front-end task that you gave it a screenshot to copy, and you can build any app, whether you know how to code or you don't know how to code. The majority of our users are developers at some of the largest companies, but you don't need to be a senior or a junior engineer with the capabilities that we're offering. And also the web ID is very valuable, because someone who's starting new to code or who doesn't want to install anything locally, they'll be able to run all this in the cloud. And this is something that would be one for non-developers. If they want to start getting access to it, they can spin up directly in the browser. Or for developers that don't want to install anything locally, then this is being executed in secure environments. So you'll be able to test it, and we have much more capabilities coming in, but I'm going to, Ivis, go ahead and then.
Great. Super nice demo. Really, really nice. I will, now we have Q&A. I already saw some questions come in, so it's a good time to start answering those questions. So let me share. I don't know why I would share big Q&A, but Oh, there is a first question. Why we can't use Python for this? Oh, I see. So there's two ways to interpret that. So one way is to say, so CodeSandbox SDK, the API that I demoed is TypeScript or JavaScript. That is because the initial version that we built with CodeSandbox is built on TypeScript. We are working on a Python SDK that also allows you essentially to spin up sandboxes. It's not released yet, but that is something that we are working on, and we should have something for that. We should have a simple version for this within the next month, where you can do the basic things. A more advanced version should be like 2-3 months out for the Python SDK. After that, the sandbox itself can execute Python code, so you can run anything that you want inside a sandbox. So sandbox is like a Lambda function, or could be used as such. I think that's a good comparison. You can consider a sandbox to be a Lambda function, but I would say that a sandbox is more stateful. So a sandbox can run far longer than a Lambda function. You can hibernate it and resume it, for example, a couple days later. So it's better suited for use cases where you need to have a longer running session. For example, you start a dev server on it, or you do a CI job that you want to run in an environment, or you want to run a headless browser. For those kind of use cases, a sandbox is more suited. It is interesting because sandboxes under the hood, we run on a VM called Firecracker, which was initially built for Lambda. So in some of those ways, we are in a very similar situation, similar technology. Oh. Can this be self-hosted? Right now, we don't have an easy way to self-host. We can self-host it, but for that, it would be best to contact us because we don't have a self-serve way to do that yet. Um, the biggest challenge with the self-hosting is that when we run the VMs, we have to run them in so-called bare metal nodes, or servers with nested virtualization support. So we would like to help with setting up like a self-hosted environment for CodeSandbox SDK. I think this is the question for Blackbox.
Yeah, just to take a look here. What's the question?
The question is, so is it a multi-agent system that uses function calling to leverage the code sandbox to run code and display things visually?
It's multi-agent. Yeah, definitely, like multi-agent in the sense like there's the browser agent, there's the like primarily it's the coding agent, but this is where most of the research that we do is on the capabilities of the coding agent, and part of it is the efforts on the SWE bench. But there's a few other agents also that are involved that are optimized for specific functions. We're definitely leveraging CodeSandbox in those cases for like executing code, like having the browser agent run like have an entire browser open and then be able to test everything visually, and then either for testing purposes or for just like you be able to see the general output at the end. But yeah, like there's many use cases as mentioned. Like there's cases also where CodeSandbox is used for like once not only the agent is like running through the code and like changing it, but post that period also, like if this was to also be like continuously running beyond that lifetime of the execution, so you would be able to keep serving whatever you reached at that point. You'll be able to keep serving it. The hibernation is a very is a very key part in terms of like if you have a web app or an API or a service that you set up, you'll be able to keep letting requests come to it beyond just the coding session.
The persistence and the hibernations were two key capabilities from CodeSandbox that literally was really cutting edge, and that was key of what we're doing, because people don't use us only to execute the code, but what if you can offer them the capability to keep these applications running or these services running? And this is something that is post execution of the code, and the hibernation is also very important. So the persistence and the hibernation are two key parts for our collaboration here. And any app that you build or any service that you build, it would be persistent anytime you want to revisit this application, and this is something that is key.
Great. For the next question, let's see. Are there any limitations or challenges developers might face when using the CodeSandbox SDK for AI agent development? In terms of limitations, the thing that we are still working on is right now it is great. The sandboxes are great for example, showing web applications or running tests or running development environments. And we use also the SDK to do development of CodeSandbox itself. So its capabilities are pretty far. But one thing that we still would really like to have is like a native Android or iOS debugger so that you can more easily build native applications. It is possible to currently build native applications within CodeSandbox SDK, but for that you have to go through some hoops where you have to set up a VNC client, install an Android emulator, and it would be cool if it was more natively available. Other than that, you can execute anything inside CodeSandbox, inside the sandbox, and so you shouldn't be limited in size. You shouldn't be limited. We have, for example, the VM size. They can go up to 128 gigabytes of RAM, and the disk size can be like 100 gigabytes. So there are not that many limits that you would have when using CodeSandbox SDK, because we initially built it really for cloud development environments, and those can become pretty big. This is a good question for Blackbox. The question is, for Flutter application development to deployment, how can we use Blackbox for this?
Yeah, I'll mute myself.
No, definitely. Like you can pretty much like for the vast majority of like adopted languages, Flutter, you can fully use it. You can also be able to use either locally the coding agent with it, but also if you wanna set things up on a virtual machine, you can also run this on CodeSandbox, like on the virtual device through App Builder. So there shouldn't be any issue with this.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's see, what other questions do we have? At the beginning, it was said that ChatGPT might not make a chart. Is that very simple, or is there more? The chart is the simplest example I can think of. That's usually what I start with when I give an example of like using CodeSandbox SDK. But that example, it is a very widespread example. Like there are a lot of startups where an AI ultimately wants to make a lot of data like more understandable, and the only way that it can really generate a reliable graph, is by writing some code. So it's a good use case, but you can go as far as building like a whole autonomous coding agent, like Blackbox is doing. So you have a pretty wide range of things you can do with a sandbox environment like this. Oh, interesting question. Is the browser agent implemented based on Playwright? Oh, this is for Blackbox.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the answer. Okay, great.
This is
The Doge.
yeah, we follow the directives
Answer.
of the Doge, so we're very efficient in the way that we communicate.
Uh-huh. I see.
No, but
Um,
to expand, and by the way, the Blackbox agent had contributed to building also the browser agent. So right now, the Blackbox agent is writing approximately 70 to 80% of our own code. We survey thousands of developers on a weekly basis, and they tell us that 2 to 3x improvement. And the major shift also that we saw is once we started working with CodeSandbox, the capabilities that we brought to the browser were really transformational. Even us as developers, sometimes we want to use the browser to execute some capabilities and some tasks. So the ability to run it fully in the browser, or as Richard said, like you can have it run it locally on your VS Code, but connected to a virtual machine. This capability is coming in the next few days, where we connect the local IDE to a virtual machine. But right now, everything that's in the browser is fully there, and the browser agent was built by the Blackbox agent.
That's super cool. That's really cool. The next question is, can you explain the workflow a little bit? Meaning, if I have the sandbox running, how do I update code coming down the AI response? I think we can both have a bit of an answer to that. I think there are multiple ways that you can implement this. One thing is that you could, for example, run an AI agent and you give the agent tools to essentially write files. So you have a write file tool, and whenever the AI wants to write the file, then it calls that tool, and then under the hood, you call sandbox.fs.write_file. That way, and then after that, you essentially make it possible to the preview will automatically update because the file was now updated. So the dev server will pick it up, and the preview will then pick it up. Richard, do you how does Blackbox do this?
Yeah, it's like pretty. So, but it's. I think what you pointed to is definitely along those lines. Just to
On the workflow. Just going. Yeah. So
you have agentic workflows.
no. Can you explain the workflow a little bit? Meaning, if the sandbox is running, how do I update the code coming down
definitely.
the AI response?
Yeah, definitely the write file, or like the write file is pretty much like the way that there's also like whenever like a file is being edited or updated. In the case, for example, where the where now like we went through briefly before on the web like app builder, the files are directly on the sandbox. So whatever we integrated as tools for the agents are directly being updated on those files. So we don't have there's no separation between where the files are and the sandbox. So the files are directly on it, and the agent is working directly on like for the full cycle of it on the sandbox. But there are the ways also times where you might have those files in two places, and you might want to sync it also with the virtual machine. But yeah, like the write file, the edit file, and pretty much for the primary cases that we've been experimenting a lot with and even expanding on is coding agent doing the full cycle execution on the virtual machine.
Great. What else do we have in terms of questions? I have used Bolt and Lovable. What edge does your Blackbox agent have over these two products?
Yeah, so short answer is like would invite everyone to try a different product and compare. Just like you use any AI tool, you'd see strength for each product. One thing that I can share about Blackbox specifically, one is to not generalize. The majority of the users on Blackbox use Blackbox for engineering work on existing very large repos. We see this in our average input token, on the way that developers use it. They don't use Blackbox. They use Blackbox for building apps from scratch or for building some cool things like Richard showed you. However, the majority of the workload that we see is on very large repos, while they are working within their teams, their companies. The interesting thing that is happening as the capabilities of these large language models continue to improve is that you're lowering the barrier to building apps for anyone to become more of like a product person or an engineer in some way to building apps by themselves without any knowledge. This is a growing market for us. This is something that's interesting. However, one thing that we do find is that the majority of the user base that we have, as mentioned, more than 10 million monthly active users. These use it every day. Like, for example, any software engineer, they spend 8-9 hours coding every day. You probably don't build 5 apps per day. You're working on a single app that you're continuing to improve. So this is where Blackbox has a lot of capabilities. And also, as Richard showed you, it has the ability to build things also from scratch. So instead of starting with building apps and then go back to solve the problem of working with very large code bases as part of the workflow of engineers, we started with much more agentic capabilities. And this aspect of, hey, it has the ability to build apps, build games, etc. It makes cool demos. It has the ability to lower the barrier for people to start building software. But I would invite you to use all of the tools that you can try. Blackbox, as mentioned, we're at the top of the SWE bench in terms of academic benchmark. Millions of users, we're adding millions of users on a monthly basis. And one thing that our goal since we started, like, we wanted to democratize a lot this technology to as many people as possible. So I would say 99% of the capabilities that you have on Blackbox are offered 100% for free. There are pro capabilities that you can unlock for extremely affordable prices, and you will be able to be the judge for yourself. So this is a concise way to answer your question.
Great, really great. For the next question, do you have any sample where multiple agents collaborate and try to find out what is the best solution? Oh, interesting. Um, Blackbox, do you have a case where multiple agents collaborate to try to find out the best solution?
Yeah, so actually this is a very good point. Actually, we're releasing in the coming days a GitHub agent that integrates directly on your GitHub repo to resolve GitHub issues that you have listed. And while this is something that is a very, like, for example, like if you take a look at any open source repo, they may have hundreds or thousands of open issues that need to be resolved. This is a case where we're actually going to have multiple agents work through these issues together and figure out what is the best appropriate solution for this. This is something that is a really interesting point for the person who asked it. You'll be able to test it in a few days. We'll make the announcement on the Blackbox website, and we'll communicate this also by email. You'll be able to integrate it directly on your GitHub repo, and there will be multiple agents collaborating together to resolve these issues. The main reason for it is that on the IDE, whichever IDE you are using, or on the web IDE that we are running on CodeSandbox, the reason for not having multiple agents collaborate is that you're working with it synchronously. So you are the primary person who is giving feedback. However, on more background tasks will be where you are less present as an engineer supervising the work. There will be multiple agents working together in the background without sharing how the collaboration will be, but this will be, and all this is running on VMs from Ivis and the team. So this is a few examples here that will be launched. Also, one thing, we will be making our IntelliJ agent available in the coming days also. So same capabilities as we showed you on the web IDE or on the VS Code will be made live on the IntelliJ IDE. So for any engineers that use JetBrains, PyCharm, etc., these capabilities are going to be coming live.
That's great. Let's see. Is there a new question. So it's a multi-agent system that uses function calling to leverage the code sandbox. Oh, I think we got this question already before.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there any? Oh, yeah. How does Blackbox AI ensure data privacy and security while processing user inputs?
Yeah, so we have so for any model interaction for if people are interested in complete privacy, we do offer something is which is available mainly for also enterprise users, is zero data retention. So it's possible to make all the interactions with the models without any data being stored beyond that interaction with Blackbox. So if you're using it with the local IDE, you'll be able to have it all, like you'll have for example, the history is all locally stored, so there wouldn't be any storage of any code changes that were done, and also similar for the web on the virtual machine. So it would purely be on the virtual device where you have it set up.
Great.
And here we have one thing. Elias is saying hello here, so we would tell him hello also from our end.
Nice. Yeah. How can I integrate an AI coding assistant in CodeSandbox using LLMs like GPT-4 for real-time code analysis, suggestions, and auto corrections while ensuring low latency and security? Wow, that's a precise question. Um, to answer this, I would I would say the best way to integrate CodeSandbox with an LLM is to it purely depends on what kind of user experience you want to create.
That
So
is
one thing that you can do is whenever the user visits your website and starts a session, you also start a sandbox. And the sandbox starts from a template that you define or from the default template. And then you have an AI agent like GPT-4 that um, that you can query, and GPT-4 will say like, "Oh, I want to run this function," or "I want to write this file," and you do this inside of the sandbox. And to the user, ultimately, you can show multiple things. You can show the code files that are in the sandbox, or you can show the preview that is running, and they can access the preview. But that way, you essentially give the AI a playground that they can work in, and create the results that you ultimately want to show to the user. And you can go as far as you'd like with the integration. You could, for example, say like maybe you want to also run a linter inside that sandbox, so that whenever an AI makes a change, you run the linter on top of it, and then you feed back the output from the linter to the AI, and then it starts to correct itself. You can go pretty far with the type of integration that you want to build, and the user experience that you want to create. But that is how I would integrate CodeSandbox to have to on top of an AI agent. As the code base scales, what problems and limitations do the coding agents discover? Yes. This is, I think, also a great question for Blackbox because there are multiple tricky things to handle when a code base scales. For example, how do you make sure that there's the right context for the LLM, or how do you ensure that um, the dependencies properly work, that the files that are written are in the right place? Those are more, I think, questions for um, the user experience, like how you implement it. I think the sandbox can scale to pretty big repositories. Blackbox, how have you approached these kind of challenges?
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting point, and this is a continuous work that we keep improving on, and the goal is to be efficient as much as possible, to not to just excessively use the context just because the model supports that size of context. So because then it would trickle down for costs for the user. So we work a lot on optimizing the context to be as relevant as possible. and we try to optimize by keeping a high performance, high accuracy, with like to see the degree to which we can be providing as minimal as possible of a context to get a high result. But yeah, like this is a continuous effort, and we keep trying, like we keep testing multiple versions to just get feedback from users on what's like on a practical basis how it's performing better. But
however, we never trade for like
Yeah.
a lower quality, so it's always
Yep.
We would give it as much context as it's needed in order to be able to properly complete the tasks. However, there are efficiencies that needs to be run instead of passing the entire repo to the agent. Sometimes you don't need to waste many tokens to analyze or to complete a certain task. So we work a lot on these efficiencies. And as mentioned, the primary goal for us is to have the best performance. And then we start working on how can we maintain this performance while making more efficiencies on this.
Great. Great. This is a big question. I built a prompt to full stack agent using Cybercoder and Blackbox AI APIs running on CodeSandbox. Now I want to add React Native apps. What challenges should I expect and how to overcome it? Interesting. Yeah, for React Native, inside CodeSandbox, we can run React Native, but the challenges are that you need to set up a VNC client to show UI from within the sandbox to a user. So what I would do is I would install inside the sandbox, you can install an Android emulator, and you can then have a VNC client that watches that Android emulator as it's running, and then it exposes a web port with a VNC viewer that runs in the web. That is one way to do it. Another way to do it is to use Expo. We can run Expo, and Expo also exposes. Hey, do you think it's because of that they have that name? I don't. Okay, well, they expose an QR code that you can scan with your phone, and then you can play with the app on the phone. So you could either go the route of like starting an Android emulator and have like a full VNC client, or you can go the route of running Expo and using the Expo app to preview the application on your own phone. Okay, we're doing one last question to round it off. That's a fun question. Why did you choose the name Blackbox?
Yeah, so very probably you'll be disappointed, but there's nothing magical about it. But just in summary, culture is very important for us. And sometimes with the name comes a certain attitude, a certain way of doing things, and it projects a bit the culture of how we think. And we didn't think too much about it, but Blackbox seemed something a bit more aggressive, something more cool, and we came across it. We're a very big fan of Aaron Levi from Box, so this is maybe a bit of an influence here, but yeah, so Box was one of the companies that were very much influenced about it, and the naming is also something that defines a bit some of the characters of the company, so something a bit more aggressive and a bit of influence here, and there's nothing more thought about it.
But that's great. That's great. Okay, then we are at the end of the session. Robert, Richard, thank you for coming to this webinar, and also thank you everyone for watching and attending and asking questions on this webinar. We have a couple of links that you can follow to try Blackbox or to try the CodeSandbox SDK. Yeah, if you have any other questions, we're available on internet. You can find us on different places, either directly via the Blackbox website or CodeSandbox. We're on Twitter or X. It's not very hard to find us. I'm curious what you'll build. Everyone have a good day or a good night.
Thank you so much, Ivis.
Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you.